Hey everyone, welcome to a deeper dive on Saltbox One. Today's objective is to go a little bit deeper on our architecture, our integrations, and how Saltbox One works. So if we have conversations that come up in pre-sales or during the beginning phases of the project about Saltbox One, how it works, you can understand a bit more about what's going on and hopefully answer the questions from either our team or from the client. So for those who may not know, Saltbox One is our internal agent we built. And there are a couple of reasons why we built this. When we initially were doing research on should we purchase or should we build, one of our big crux here of using agents is it needs to be contextually aware of our projects. And having something that is aware of our ecosystem of data and the specific customer we're dealing with and Salesforce and commerce and all those things together just doesn't exist. And a year and a half after starting this path, it still doesn't exist. Things have gotten closer to it, but we still don't have the ability to bring all those into a single conversation. And so that's why we sought out to build Saltbox One. So just a quick overview. This is a slide you guys can use in the future. I keep it updated in one of my decks. But as we continue to add use cases, we'll continue to update this. We've broken these use cases out by phase. So the idea is that we continue to fill out these use cases by individual. You can see on the top right corner, we've got a key here. All the blue ones are the leads on our projects. Leadership is the green, and so on. And we'll continue to build out these use cases by phase so that we bolster up how we deliver our projects. So building an enterprise-grade AI agent is actually pretty difficult. On the top right-hand side here, you see Saltbox One. So that's what you see. You see the interface, you see the projects, you see the context that comes back, and hopefully good results from that and speeding up the projects. Under the hood, though, it's quite complex. We'll start kind of here at level one, which is our ecosystem of apps. Inside of our ecosystem apps, the most prominent ones are here on the right-hand side. So we've got different sources. We've got GitHub. We've got our Atlassian products. That's both Jira and Confluence. We also have Salesforce, so think of the project that's in Salesforce with who's on that project and some of the details about the customer. We then have Elastic. Elastic is our application that we use for searching and also RAG results. That allows us to provide the agent the right information at the right time. And then we have, of course, Fireflies, and everyone should understand and know Fireflies. But use cases that require us to have details about the meetings require us to have some form of that transcript in our ecosystem. So we have all these apps, and we need to be able to connect it into Saltbox One. We then have our agents and observability. And what this essentially means is we need some LLM, in our case it's OpenAI, in their API to actually provide the responses to the questions or the prompts that the users actually provide in Saltbox One. This is kind of the tip of the tier on this tier right now. So it's not just about getting the responses, but it's also about tracking what actually happened and evaluate, was it successful or was it not? Logging those results and improving the performance of that. So there's a whole ecosystem of observability that we have in a tool called LangFuse that actually allows us to track, was the response appropriate or was it something that needs to be improved? So that's level 2 here. Level 3 is our infrastructure and framework. So really going a little bit deep here, we need to provide a scalable solution, something that can scale to multiple users, but also multiple projects and a large volume of data. We also have our development and DevOps pipeline. So how do we actually test this incrementally? How do we create review apps? How do we push it up into QA, staging, production? Just like we normally would on our projects, we've got that whole ecosystem here. We have queues as well. We use a tool called Redis that is used to help us ingest a large volume of data and tasks and then slowly chunk through them and process and iterate on them. And then we have webhooks from tools like Atlassian, who, as items change in Jira, they send us an API request, we look at it, we process it, we decide what to do with it, and then we put it into our database. And so we use tools like Skyvia, Postgres, Redis, VO, Heroku, in order to build up this ecosystem to provide a tool like S1. And this, on each of these tiers, are really just scratching the surface. There's a lot more detail underneath each one of these, but this kind of helps you all understand how much time, energy has gone into making sure that we have a flexible and also secure platform that is enterprise grade. So going, again, one level deeper here in more of a traditional diagram, we can see on the left-hand side all the systems that we have in play here. I talked about a few of those a moment ago. You can see that on the screen here. I'll just pull my mouse in so you can look at this. On the left-hand side, we have Elastic. We're consuming all this data into Elastic, into indexes. If you're not familiar with what RAG is, it's Retrieval Augmented Generation, which basically means that when a user prompts something like, hey, what's the difference between level 1, level 2 fidelity in our user stories in the Saltbox success system? OpenAI doesn't know anything about that. So what we're doing at the time of that request is we're going to Elastic and saying, find all of the Confluence pages and all the sections in those Confluence pages that are the most relevant to this search term or this phrase that the user has actually put in that prompt. And then we extract those pieces of content. And when we ask OpenAI to answer this question about L1, L2, we also give it these reference documents. And it says, oh, well, based on that, here's the answer. And it parses through those. So that's a little bit of a breakdown of how Elastic helps us be more relevant in our researches and what this RAG search term here is. So again, behind the scenes here, this is all within our Saltbox One infrastructure. We have our interface, which is S1. Behind the scenes, we have an application called Keystone. Keystone is our app that does all of the handling of the requests, and it connects into OpenAI, into RAG, and all the things that require or allow us to actually make this work. And then on the bottom here, we've got Skyvia, which is our integration application, and it consumes our ecosystem of data like Salesforce, Jira, Confluence, etc., and it brings it into Postgres, which is our database layer. We have that within Heroku, and it's connected to all of our apps and applications. And then lastly is just this concept of what we call the Q gateway. The Q gateway is, I mentioned earlier with Redis, but it is how we chunk up really complex and lengthy tasks. So for instance, Fireflies comes in. Fireflies, you may have a 2-hour meeting. Well, 2 hours is a long time, and it takes quite a bit of processing to go through the full transcript and bring out the requirements, create summary reports, and decide what to do with it. And so the Q Gateway is an asynchronous application that can take that transcript, do all that work, whether it takes a second or it takes 5 minutes, decide what to do with it, and then bring it back into our data that we can then act on. So moving on to a different concept here, you're probably aware of this term called context engineering. If you're not, some research on it would probably be good because it is the foundation of a lot of what we do and agents do as well. On the left-hand side here, we have what I call our available context. And this available context is everything that you possibly could have that would be relevant to answer a question. So if you think of it from a human's perspective, you're on this project, you've had multiple conversations with the customer, you've also been at Saltbox for years. In your mind, you're thinking, all right, well, I know how to get to this information. It's in the Saltbox success system. I can go to this spot in GitHub to look at this reference. I can go to this existing project because I know we did it over here. We've got all this context in our brains and in our tools. This is the same concept with the agent. So we build what we call a project graph, which pulls together all the contextual information about the project. And when we initiate the planner, which is our frame of how we actually decide what to do, we're planning the execution of how to get to the outcome. That planner is going to decide what is the most relevant context window that we can then send over to the LLM to execute the actions. So as an example here, I asked a question. It's going to use a prompt template, which is a long template that actually explains to the LLM what it should do and who it is and how it should respond. We're then going to pull the most relevant documents from our RAG search. We'll pull a concept called memories that we'll talk about later. And then we actually have a series of actions or tools. It's going to pick the most relevant tools or actions, potentially use shortcuts, which is if you've used S1 before, you can go and actually use a shortcut into a meeting or into a Jira story or sprint. It may pull relevant meetings and then continue to add this context window. And all of this context is then sent over to the planner, which is then what actually decides, okay, well, based on this information, what I know, I need to do these 4 steps. I need to extract the meeting. I need to get the details about the Jira story. I need to plan what stories I'm going to create based on that meeting. And then I'm going to give the output to it. So that's what our concept of this project graph is, and how we pull all this information together into what we call the context window and into the actual execution of this. So now, how does this actually work in real time? And this is a little future facing if you're watching this immediately, because this is a new version of S1 that I'm going to show in snippets here that's coming out soon. But how does this actually work? Let's say that you actually go in there and you say, can you create stories for or from this meeting? In this case, it's one of our stand-ups. Well, what Saltbox One is going to do is it's going to look at this and say, okay, well, they used a shortcut, and so I need to go extract the details of that shortcut. So it's going to extract the summary details and some of the requirements. It's going to pass it over to Elastic using a RAG search, and it's going to find the most relevant results. And once it does that, it's then going to retrieve our actions. And so we have another concept called action graph, which is a series of 30 plus actions that we have available in our repository that say, here are the things you could actually go and execute. And it's got a little bit more complexity of like the inputs and outputs that help it map it together. But it basically maps out all the actions. And then it actually sends all this over to OpenAI, and we ask it, create a plan to actually execute or solve the user's prompt based on the actions and the details that we've given you on that context window in the last slide that we just went over. And so all that shows up here. The orchestrator starts executing, it starts thinking about what to do, and then from there, it starts to build this plan. And so you're going to see something like this where it says, okay, we're going to extract the transcript here, we're going to create our stories from the requirements, which is going to go back to the OpenAI with a specific prompt template that says, here's how to do that with all the details it needs. So then I'm going to go to our database and say, let me see if there's any duplicate stories that we might find. Make sure we don't create duplicates. And then it's going to actually finalize the stories and put those into the right format. And once it does that, it'll then show what we're used to, which is the tool of the story. Now all this is happening behind the scenes already, but now we're showing this a bit more upfront to the user so they know what's going on and why it's taking time to actually go through that process. And then it also gives us more flexibility to add more steps into this process in the future if we want. So that's maybe call a medium level dive down into Saltbox One. Hopefully that was helpful and gives you a little bit of context about why we've built S1 in the first place, what the ecosystem looks like, what some of the challenges were, how this actually operates behind the scenes, and what we actually do to produce high quality results. So you can answer questions from the team and also from prospects and customers.